Hi everyone, here we are from Group 10. We'll explain about one of the functional English grammar materials, that is cohesion. And let's introduce to the member first. The first member is Albert Kuncoro Bagus Prasojo, and then Rizka Amalia Laduni, Adam Hussein Fahri, and then the last is Amala Malik. So let's move on to the materials. Cohesion. Cohesion refers to the resources within language that provide continuity in a text, over and above that provided by clause structure and clause complexes. Hence, cohesive relations are non-structural relations which work to help a text hang together. We shall be looking at three of these kinds of relationship in this chapter. There is reference, lexical cohesion, and conjunction. Reference. Reference refers to systems which introduce and track the identity of participants through text. It is related to textual meaning and thus to mood. Systems of reference allows us to track participants through text and to see where they have come from. We can find what are called chains in a text, and this show how participants can be tracked through the text. We will look briefly at two aspects of reference: system of reference and retrieval. And then this is systems of reference. There are three main distinctions to make here. First, whether the participant is being mentioned for the first time in the text or whether it is a subsequent mention. And then second, reference is to a generic class or to a specific individual. And the last, reference is comparative or not. And you can see in the box on the right, the method of analysis is to provide information about generic or specific, presenting or presuming, and comparison or not. And then this is an example of the analysis. There is a sentence: we saw lots of snakes at Reptile World. Some of them came out of the logs and ate the dead mice, but the other snakes stayed under the logs. To simplify the analysis, we take the core phrase of the sentence. Let's analyze from the first phrase. Lots of snakes. This phrase is specific because it talks about snakes at Reptile World, and then this is presenting because in the phrase it mentions snakes directly and is not comparative. And then the second phrase, some of them. This is still specific because it talks about the same snakes. There is snakes at Reptile World, and then presuming because snakes are no longer mentioned but you pronounce them. And then the last phrase, the other snakes. It is also still specific because it talks about the same snakes at Reptile World, and here also use pronouns, so it doesn't mention snakes. Then here it's comparative because it is compare. Some of them came out of the logs and ate the dead mice, but the other snakes stayed under the logs. And then the next is retrieval. Type of retrieval. In tracking who is who and what is what in the text, we use systems of retrieval. First is anaphor. If we take example from the previous slide, we retrieve the identity of them by looking back in the text to see a reference for the pronoun and we find snakes. This noun is anaphor. And in homophore, we can look at this by going back to the idea of the context of culture and situation. We can retrieve the identity of a participant in several possible ways, either by reference to the context or of culture or situation, or from within the text or outside it. Retrieval through the context of culture is known as homophore. For example, when I woke up in this morning, the sun was shining. In this text, we retrieve the identity of the sun through cultural knowledge, so no one would ask which sun.
Thank you, the presenter, about the great explanation. Now we explore Explore, which is the retrieval identity, identify from local context of the situation. Is different from homophora. Retrieval of the explore is just focused in the situation. For the example, that koala over there is really sleepy. To identify that koala over there, we would have to be in the context. This type of reference is very common in spoken text, where the context can be used to refer, and there is opportunity to check or confirm identity. And the last one is bridging. I'm sorry about the last one. This is include from retrieval. Bridging. This is where the reference is indirect, where we assume the identify of the part from the whole. For the example, we talk toward the kiosk, but the windows were both shut. Here, we retrieve the identity of windows by virtue of them being part of the kiosk. And there is another type for functional grammar. There is cohesion. There is lexical cohesion and field. Yeah, will be presented by another presenter. Thank you.
Well, the next is about lexical cohesion and field. But before we go to the lexical cohesion and field, we need to know that language have two different forms. The first one is written form that usually conducting formal situation, formal context, and the second is about spoken form that usually conducting informal situation. For the both form, we must to conduct cohesion in every sentence or word that we write or convey or speak. In helping you to write or speak, so it is need language device as called lexical cohesion. Lexical here is more about words or vocabulary, language grammar, and its construction. And cohesion refers to the source with a language that provides continuity in a text. So lexical cohesion is the relationship between and among words and in the relationships among them. This can be either more or less permanent. Lexical cohesion is mainly related to field, and field itself is tends to specialize vocabulary and tend to engage in special activities. In the text types in which writer opinion or judgment is overt, lexical cohesion is also revealing for interpersonal meanings through use of attitudinal lexis and qualitative attributes. Well, interpersonal is almost the same meaning with empathy, but interpersonal here is more about how we understand or predict what they want to convey or what they want to say. And then qualitative deals with characteristics that can be easily measured but can be observed subjectively. The next is about eight categories of lexical cohesion that presented by Hansan in 1984, the type 1 is general, and in general first there is a repetition. As we know, it's just a repetition, including inflection and derivation. For example, the word live, living, left. And then the second one is synonymy. It's mean the similarity of meanings of the word. For example, the word live with the word depart, that they have the same meaning. And then the next is about the antonymy. It's about the opposite or contrastive meaning. For the example, the word leave with the word arrive. And then the next is hyponymy. Hyponymy is about classes, superordination, and subclasses, or is a type of blah 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 or category of blah blah blah. For example, the word rose and flower. A rose is a type of a flower. And then the next is meronymy. The whole part relations. For example, the word flower, petal stems as and co-meronymies. For the second type is instantials. The first one, equivalent. Equivalence is two or more items are one and the same in the context of some particular text. For example, here is the sailor was their daddy. In this sentence means that their daddy is a sailor. And then the second is about naming. A participant's name is provided. For example, they called their puppy Fluffy. In this sentence, the word Fluffy is their puppy's name. So the word they here as a subject. They already give name to their puppies. Semblance. Two or more items in the text are said to resemble each other. For example, the wave rode in and he could see their white caps looking like seahorse. So this is semblance. I can say that semblance is more refers to the relationship between words.
Okay, the next material is about conjunctions. I know maybe one of you already know what it is. A conjunction is usually used to link a clause and sentence. Maybe you already familiar with this word like and, therefore, thus, but, moreover, etc. in the way you learn English or grammar. Those things is called a conjunction. According to Holiday 1994, conjunctions help to build cohesion through joining clauses with a sentence. Conjunction also shows how one clause is linked to another by expressing the relationship between ideas. It means that by using conjunctions, you will be able to increase the cohesive device in your writing or your speaking. And let's refresh a little bit about our mind about what is the cohesive device means is. The cohesive device is the word or phrases used to connect ideas between different parts of the text. In conclusions, a cohesive device binds text together and bridges the gaps to avoid misleading context and achieve text coherence. In writing, cohesive pattern or cohesive devices is really important, especially for the conjunctions, because it would help the writer create and express a logical relationship between the part of the text. According to Martin 1992, there is a fourth type of conjunctions. First is temporal conjunctions. The temporal conjunctions tell us about a time. When will something happen? Which of the two happen first? The example of the conjunction is like at the same time, finally, at first, previously, and etc. And the next conjunctions is consequences conjunctions. We use consequence conjunctions to tell about the consequences. For example, like consequently, in consequence, as the consequence, as a result, in turn, therefore, hence, for these reasons, and etc. The next is comparisons conjunctions. We use comparison conjunctions to compare one thing to another to show how they are alike or related. For example, the conjunctions is like equally, likewise, but, instead, and etc. And the next conjunctions is additions conjunctions. We use these conjunctions usually to express additions or combinations. For example, and furthermore, in additions, or, and etc. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, as you can see here, there is more example about conjunctions according to Martin 1992. As you can see, these are four conjunctions, and on the next columns is the examples. You can pause the video and see the example of the conjunctions. And after you understand, let's go to the next slide. Actually, the table before is very useful for showing the relationship between those conjunctions which serve a cohesive functions in distinctive internal serve, or textual functions, and external or internal cohesive serve, either an additional or textual functions, and those which serve to link clauses into clause complex. And for the conclusions about these cohesive devices of conjunctions, the conjunctions is very important because conjunctions we are able to connect several words and even broader concepts and ideas together. So that's why a conjunction is really important. And that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you.